Welcome to the Disrupt Leaders podcast. This is season 2, episode 3, and we're going into group workshops, group huddles. How do we go about it? We go into workplaces, Bill, and we see this run wrong all the time. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, some people do certain parts of this very, very well, but I think once you've sat in a couple really good workshops and a couple of really good training sessions, it becomes very painful when you go into one that's really poor, I think. And it's so hard to not notice the things that are wrong. So yeah, I think it's going to be a really good session. It's a lot of things that you and I are very passionate around. I think this is something that you and I talk about a lot when we go to group trainings ourselves. So yeah, I'm very keen for this one. So what do you think the listeners are going to get out of this one, Jules?
So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down into its parts. So we're going to break it down into how do you plan into maybe a bit of breakdancing for sure. Maybe don't breakdance unless you're a really good breakdancer. Maybe do some breakdancing in your group session. Pull out all the stops if you really want to. But first of all, we're going to walk through the kind of what is a group working session? Like, when is it going to really come up in your workplace? Are you going to places got their kind of L&D team, their kind of training team that runs through these things? But it's good for you to know as well. How do you actually plan for those group coaching sessions? What do you actually bring in with you? Which brings us to materials. So that could be, your PowerPoint, maybe some secret stuff that Bill and Jules have in store for you. Beyond that, it's the do's and don'ts, the 4 P's, so to speak, of a group huddle, or what do you actually do? What do you actually, apart from breakdancing, what do you actually do in your sessions? And Correct. Finally, we love this. You're going to hear this for every podcast between now and eternity, commitments. We love our commitments. We're not afraid of commitment, Bill and I, which is great.
Put a ring on it, dog. Put a ring on it.
Put a ring on it. And finally, it's the all-important follow-up as well. What are you following up? Those commitments we just spoke about before. What are you talking about, man? So we just stop the podcast now. I think we've covered it all.
That's it. We wrap it up. That's what you have to do. Just do those things.
Correct.
The thing that's kind of prompted this for me, I guess, and this the thought that's brought this about is recently, obviously, I've started a couple new roles. I spoke about this last week, and there was just like a common underlying trend when I've sat through a lot of the training. And then just in a lot of things that we would have on our don't list. And I feel like it's led to a lot of training sessions that for the people that are in them don't come out of it as equipped as they would. And I don't necessarily think that it's one of those things like, I think a lot of people can do an okay training session and deliver an okay training session, and a lot of what will go in will stick in. But if you're doing like 2 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is of training, and you only can, there's only so much you can have sink into your brain, I think. And so this is the thought that's driven this is we want you to, when you sit with your people and you do a group training session for 30 minutes, they absorb most of it. All of it, even like if we're really shooting for the stars, and so that's the plan. Now, this kind of stuff that will come up pretty often, I think, in your role as well. Like, for example, I've just started at a new place, and I've noticed there's a lot of common trends that most of the people in my team don't do. So a big one would be like effective questioning. I don't think the guys are asking great questions. A lot of things are going unanswered, and they're just jumping straight into solution mode, right? So these are the kind of things that when you notice that trend amongst 2, 3, 4 of your team, and you're like, all right, it's time to nip this in the bud and just present it to everybody. It's something that comes up pretty often when you say, Jules, I would say.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's if you're doing leader and you're looking at the stats, you're looking at people's performances, you'll figure out there's usually some underlying connections there. There's some things that most of your people are doing that you really want to hit off. It also could be you also run group coaching sessions on changes as well. We've run episodes before on change management, but that could be some wide sweeping changes going through your business, and you really need to get everyone on board. So you have to run some refreshers or some sessions to kind of actually launch that change.
And I think it just gives consistency. It makes sure that everybody's on the same page as well. You might have some people in the team that do a thing well, you might have some that don't. But if you just present it to everybody, then everybody understands the standard. And it just mitigates and removes any opportunity for someone to be like, oh, I didn't know that was the process. Oh, I didn't know. Well, you did, because everybody else in the team is doing it and you were in the same room. So if you don't know, it means you weren't paying attention or doing your job. So which is it? And I just think as a leader, it gives you that. It's so much easier to create accountability. And you just want consistency amongst your team. You want everybody to know the same message and deliver the same message. So, Jules, let's say something's come up. I don't know if do you want to use an example the whole way through? I think maybe we will. We'll go with my current one, effective questioning. So let's say you're me, Jules, you've walked into the place that I work, sat down, listened to a bunch of calls, and you're like, these guys are not asking effective questions. You've decided in your head, you're like, you know what, I'm going to do a group session on this. Bill and Jules mentioned reasons why. I agree with them. What do you do to start planning for that session, I guess?
Yeah, 100%. So you've already started the first step, which is obviously observing your people, understanding what they're actually doing when it comes to that behavior. I think that's really key because it gives you your plan of attack, right, when you go into your huddle. The first thing I want to start out is I want to know exactly how long the session is for, depending if it's a half an hour huddle or an hour huddle or a couple hours. It changes really dramatically what you might do, because you might be able to do more activities if longer session, because activities really nail things into your head. You know what I mean? Like you get people to practice and practice over and over again with different people. That's really fantastic. But if you've got a time like Bill and I used to have, just half an hour, you really need to be a bit tighter around what you do. So you need to really prioritize what you observe. Now, the key to this is you need to understand, is it a will thing? Is it a skill thing? Right? I think that's the first thing you need to establish when you're doing your planning. Now, if it's a will thing, then it's you need to run the huddle based on overcoming some of those objections they might have to actually doing it, and that's where you spend most of your time. If it's a skill thing, then you might spend more time understanding examples. You might spend time practicing that kind of stuff, and that can really change how you run that huddle, if that makes sense, Bill.
Yeah, no, I think it 100% does, and I think you're very correct. Is it a will or skill thing? I think a lot of places, it tends to probably be more skill than will, I think, in my experience. When it comes to this kind of stuff, I think a lot of one-on-one coaching sessions, it could very well be either, depending on the person. But I typically think that if it's a group sentiment, it's very unlikely that it's a will-based issue amongst half your team, 2/3 of your team, unless something's drastically gone wrong. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of the time it is going to be skill-based. And I think you're bang on as well. I definitely think that it depends how long you've got. Most workplaces, I think, probably have about 30 minutes. And so I think with that 30 minutes, you really need to look at getting the most bang for buck is probably what I would do. I probably still would try to get... Pardon me. I would probably still try to get an activity in there, I reckon.
Oh, for sure.
I think I'd still try to get something in that kind of like drives the point home. And that's probably the first thing that I would plan my session around. Like, what do I want to do? How long do I want it to take? What's it going to do? So, for example, I have planned one because I've got my group session coming up on effective questioning. So if you actually in my team, don't listen to this because it's spoilers for the actual activity. So I planned a bit of an activity that my session linchpins around. And effectively, it's like a 20 questions, who am I? And you've got to guess who I am. So in the first instance, they can only ask yes or no questions. I'm only going to answer yes or no. Try to see how long it takes them to guess which celebrity I am. And then we'll then go into a bunch of training around effective questionings. What's a good open question? That sort of jazz, which we'll come probably back to. Then the next couple of times you do the example, they're allowed to ask more open questions. And then we probably have a third one because usually you find the second time they're still asking a bit closed questions. And so each time they start getting better at asking open questions. And by the end, they'll probably get it right in 2 or 3 questions. Now, I know that will probably take about 10 to 15 minutes because the first one will take forever. We'll probably give up before they get there with yes or no questions. So I know that I've probably got about 15 minutes by the time you've had time to, guff and say hello at the beginning and the end. So I probably know I've got about 15 minutes of actual other content I need outside of the game. And so then I'll plan that around that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know. I love that. I think, I used to do a very similar game, which was thought to be by a trainer facilitator as well. Fantastically every time around effective questions, and I pretend to be a doctor. So I actually start off there.
I love that one.
Yeah. I think you've seen me do it. Yeah. So I start off the session kind of go, oh, hey guys, I'm not feeling that well. And some people actually like really kind of buy into it. They'll be like, oh, Jules, are you okay? Because I don't say anything. I actually just start and I used to do this in person sometimes, just walk into the room, just like put my books down. And I'm like, oh my guys, I'm just not feeling well. Like I'm feeling really kind of weird. And then I go, guys, and then I go, guys, actually, I want you to be my doctor. And they kind of know then it's a role play, but it's funny how they really buy into it to begin with. And it's a great icebreaker. And what I do is essentially if you're lucky, if you have someone else that can join you in the meeting, or you've got someone else like a 2IC or someone that's running it for you, this is a really good one as well, is I get them to note down the amount of questions people ask me, the amount of solutions they give me, how many closed and open questions, right? And essentially what I encourage them to do is start asking me questions to kind of really identify what my issue is based on my symptoms, etc. And what invariably people do is they ask a lot of closed questions, right? Like they ask a lot of closed questions, or the classic. If you ever been to a GP in your whole life, have you taken Panadol out as well, right? And you identify that there's a lot of solutions without any actual all that kind of stuff. And at the end, we kind of go through how many closed questions asked, how many open questions, how many solutions were offered. And usually it's a really poignant exercise because people go, oh, geez, yeah, well, I am asking a million questions and getting nowhere. So I need to ask more questions. So I think the lesson you've got to take away with something like that, and in terms of your planning, is taking people out of their own heads sometimes. Sometimes if you use a work-related example, they cannot get out of that scenario because they're just used to doing something for a very long time and they cannot see that scenario differently. So if you do something like Bill and I...
for the trees, I would say.
Correct,
They just can't see the forest for the trees.
Like taking it outside and taking it to a real-life example is, I reckon, a great way. And I think in most cases works better than using a work example. I'll be honest.
I wouldn't even say most cases. I would say all cases.
Say all cases, yeah.
It's interesting. You listen to both of our games. They're both the same, but different. But I think both times it becomes very clear to them that they're just asking a lot of questions. Like it's just like putting a number to it that they wouldn't have thought of if you used a work example, because that's the norm. But when you show them it's not the norm and you go, actually, this is something you're doing that could be more efficient, I think it's quite eye-opening.
Yeah.
So you want to kind of plan your activity around that. Like it needs to be not work related and something that's making them going to go, shit, I am doing that. I am not paying attention and active listening. I am not asking the right questions. Sorry, Jules, what did you say?
No, all good. I think here is where the planning comes in. Is really deciding how long you want to spend on the activity, how long you want to spend on each part. So let's follow Bill's example a little bit, right? So are you thinking you start let's plan with Bill. Let's plan with Bill. Actually, that's a good one. There you go.
Let's plan a session out right now.
So you're thinking? Are you thinking you start the first 5 minutes or whatever with that activity? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. So generally, the way that I'll run the session, obviously agenda first. We know that. We love a cheeky agenda. We're here to talk about questioning today.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. The activity will be, so the first example, the very first of these, there's 3 times that I'll do it. The first one is the first thing we'll do. So question number 1, ask me a bunch of questions, try to guess who I am, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, it will take forever. They'll probably fail, to be honest. Like just yes or no, like it's so hard to narrow down to the specific person that you are with yes or no questions. Yeah. And even if they get it, like I'll give them a maximum number of 20. I've never had anyone get it in under 15. Then after that is when I'll actually go into a bit of workshopping around what is a good question. So how do you think you went? And I think it's really good. Like we spoke about this last week, a good coaching session is about self-reflection. And I think this is another really good point for our listeners as well. If I just tell them, how do you think you went? You went shit at questioning, you'd ask too many questions, maybe you should ask less questions, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to be as powerful as me going, so guys, do we think that was effective? Right? It took 20 questions. We still didn't find out who I was. How do you think, you tell me, what do you think? And then they'll probably go, yeah, we asked a lot of questions. Yeah, it didn't really work. Okay, well, what could you have done differently? And really get them to think about what they could have done. Then we'll have a bit of a conversation around question types, I think. So open questions, probing questions, closed questions, like, the funnel. Don't take the chocolate. Are you familiar with that one?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. For our listeners at home, if you're not, there's a study that was done on young kids years ago, and they gave them a piece of chocolate, and they were told, basically, we're going to leave for 5 minutes. If we come back and you haven't eaten that chocolate, we'll give you another one, so you can have 2 pieces. And most kids just eat the chocolate because they're kids and they're not, don't have that cognitive function. But you want to train your consultants to not do that with information that customers give them. And customers give them a little piece of information. Don't give me a solution. Don't take the chocolate. So we'll go into that. Then I'll do it again. And then I'll do the second time. I'll ask okay, try and guess who I am. I always find, I've done this a couple of times, when they ask questions the second time, they ask more open questions, but because they're all firing questions at me as a group, there'll be a couple of people that'll just ask closed questions.
Yes. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Are you in movies like that? And it's like,
so here's where the planning comes in, then, right? So Bill's already laid out all that kind of stuff. I think that what you need to do as a leader is not get trapped into rabbit holes with each of those things. I think what'll happen is, especially if you've got really tight sessions, in the case of 30, easily you could be 25 minutes in and you're still on defining what an open question is or closed, what I mean? So you've got to be really careful. So I think, be conscious. You've got to let some things run. Like sometimes if you're on a really good roll and you think it's nailing, that's fine. That's fine to spend extra time in certain places, but then you've got to be prepared to take away time from something else. So I think if you're kind of breaking that down, then in the planning, so you've got first, you got your agenda, you got this is what we're going to run through today, guys. Would you actually say in this agenda though, kind of effective questions, because that kind of gives a lead away in your example?
The presentation's first slide is effective questioning. So yes, I would. In this, I would. I just said we're just going to work on our questioning today. I feel like, and I'll probably give a bit of a reason why. I think it's always important to give context as well. I think for me personally, if we're going into our do's a little bit, it's more powerful if people understand. At the end and at some point, there needs to be a benefit to them as well. which I also have in my Prezzo as well. But I would. And so look, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to play a little bit of a game around effective questioning, asking some questions, and then we're going to go into what makes a good question. Okay. Let's get into it. That's the plan.
No, fair enough. I personally take the route if I'm doing something like that. I like to. I would say that we're running exercise today, and I wouldn't even say what the exercise is on. And I'm into it, if I was setting the agenda personally, just because I want them to then, because if I say we're running a thing on questioning, you might get some smart cookies in there actually asking effective questions can derail the example sometimes, because naturally people like to ask more closed questions.
Well, that's why I literally say for the first example, I will only answer yes or no.
Oh, okay.
So I don't give them. It's not like you can ask me any questions and just assume and hope they'll ask closed questions. I make them ask closed questions to highlight how ineffective it is.
Okay, right. Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, cool. Well, So again, this is where you go into the planning around your game. Also, your exercise will determine how you set agenda as well. And this is the things that go into planning, and we're trying to give you a bit of an insight into that. Awesome. The other thing around planning, and this is kind of a good segue into our guest point around materials, right? And you've kind of gone into a little bit, Bill, already. You've a PowerPoint, right? Or you have? Yeah, cool, nice. Yep. How did you decide? What have you decided with the PowerPoint? How have you decided that?
Yeah, great question. I think, to be honest, what I did first, coming back to, because planning and materials, I guess, kind of go a little hand in hand. Mm-hmm. I outlined my session plan in a notepad first, not a physical notepad. It's not the 1980s, but on my computer, I outlined the things I wanted to do. And I'll be honest, I think this is a really important step, and it's something that really works well for me. Mm-hmm. I worked out that I wanted to do that. So I wanted to do the questions, do that little game, work out what, effective questions are, what a good question is, do that game one or two more times, then go into benefits commitments. Mm-hmm. But it took me a little while to get to that flow, to be honest with you. I put down the things that I wanted to get out of the session first, the couple of things that I knew I was going to do. I knew I was going to do the game. And then from there, I started to run through in my head the flow of how I would conduct the session. And I was very much thinking about how the thing that was on my mind a lot, how can I make this interactive? I don't want to talk at my people for 30 minutes about good questions they're not going to learn. At every single step of the way, how can I make this interactive? How can I ask them a question that's going to make them think, that's going to make them come up with a solution themselves? And if I can't at this particular point, then maybe that thing doesn't go there. And what I found happens a lot is when you think at the end of let's say, for example, I've got a section on what makes a good question. What makes a good question to the gang? And I thought about what the kind of answers would be. Maybe that doesn't fit in with where I originally had it. Maybe that actually gives away answers for something that's coming up next. And maybe certain things blended together. And maybe those two things actually should be one slide, not two. And so I think that's what I would do, is really think about how can you make this interactive? How can you put it back on them? And then how does that fit in with the other things that you've got done? I would say, so in my PowerPoint, I think there are 6 slides total, including the agenda slide. And I would say on on 5 of the 6, it would be at the end of the slide is a question for them. The slide that doesn't have a question for them is the opening what are effective questions slide, right? Every other single slide should finish with, so what do you think? Anything you want to add to today's agenda? Yeah. Okay. Reflective. How do you think that went? What do you think effective questioning is? Yeah. Every single slide should finish with a question, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I like it. Yeah, I think a PowerPoint's a really good way. I know it's kind of really cliched, and a lot of people stay away from PowerPoint sometimes. I think the trick around PowerPoints, and Bill and I've told you this before, so if you're not going to listen to season 1, because not War and Peace, please, for God's sakes, it is a bugbear for both of us, but it is never effective, whether you're talking or showing, to have a whole bunch of words, right? I'm going to say this. Never effective.
I'm going to say this right now. You said it, and I guarantee the people that have been listening to this so far that have gone, oh, fuck a PowerPoint, right? All those people that don't like PowerPoints, all those people that think PowerPoints are cliches, it's because they've sat in so many bad ones.
Yeah, 100%.
It is what it is. That's exactly what it is. It's not that PowerPoints are bad, it's that they are used poorly more often than not. Mm-hmm. The reason that you don't like PowerPoints is because you've sat there and had someone talk at you for 45 minutes while War and Peace is written behind them, and you're expected to just sit there. You're like, this is boring. And you're right, it is. But that's someone. But if you have someone come in and crush a PowerPoint, you go, man, damn, that was a good session.
Yeah. The good PowerPoints really stand out, right? Like they've put effort into it. Yeah. A little bit of magic in the background. I think it has to go hand in hand with good delivery, which we'll kind of cover off in our do's and don'ts, I guess, a little bit. But I think with the PowerPoint, short and sweet, it doesn't have to be, it can even just be one sentence each PowerPoint. That's cool. It doesn't have to be because the whole point of running a training session is what Bill ran around before, was the interaction, right? If there's a whole bunch of stuff on there, they're not interacting with one another or yourself. They're just reading a whole bunch of stuff. So 100%, I think just run a simple word in there, or even a picture or something. Just, keep it fun as well. Like I personally like to put like little, GIFs in there, little pictures in there, whatever it is, like just to kind of keep it fun and exciting for people. It doesn't have to be, and know your audience as well. And this is going back to the planning a little bit. So if you're running a huddle for just consultants, that kind of stuff, you want to make it fun and relatable and all that kind of stuff. And for, extended leadership or something like that, you probably need to have a little bit more graphs in there around numbers and that kind of stuff, because you want to kind of prove the point you're making. Plan around that. But PowerPoint's really fantastic. Even if you want to, you can. I'm not a big fan of this, but it can work if it's done really well. Again, very cliched. You play a video or something that kind of proves your point. I think you and I, when we did the what was it for? We played like an assumptions thing where be careful about making dangerous assumptions. We did the Key and Peele phone conversation. For those who haven't seen it, I think search up Key and Peele messaging, where they're messaging one another and they're getting crossed because they're just misinterpreting each other's text messages. That was a great one for consultants to show them, hey, you cannot just go off what a person says or what a person types. You need to ask them questions to understand them a little bit more. So that's a really good example as well. Cool.
One thing I want to add, I have a bit of a golden rule for PowerPoints, and this might help you at home if you've sat in a lot of boring PowerPoints, you're not very good at making PowerPoints, right? In my opinion, the PowerPoint presentation itself serves two functions, and only two functions only. So when you're thinking about what content to put on there, there should be just enough on the screen to remind you of your talking points. Here's the first one, right? So if you've got 5 things that you want to say, 1 to 2 words per point, or one like very, very brief sentence, 5, 6 words, full stop, bang, reminds you what you want to say, or should be to drive your point home, which might be a picture or something like that. It shouldn't really be all the information on the screen. You want people listening to you. You don't want people reading. So just put enough on there that it kind of highlights the key of your point. That's it. Move on. If you do that, you'll be sweet. And you'll find that people will start to enjoy your PowerPoints more. Bang.
The other thing as well is around materials. Now, we spoke about before about like showing everyday examples, or doing an exercise with everyday examples. I've seen it where I've had consultants run huddles for me, and they bring in chats or conversations that have already happened, and they go, client has said this, how would you respond? And they actually they get everyone to answer questions, and they go, this is how the consultant actually responded. How do you think the client responded? And it was really cool to see, how we went as a group, as opposed to how the consultant went in that example. And they chose either their own examples, or they chose they asked permission from people, blah, blah, blah. But it was really cool that kind of journey as well. People, because they were like, what
it's interactive, right?
Yeah, correct. It was really good. So interactive, I think, is really key, which gets into
I was going to say, to summarize material, but as we move on to do's, our first do is make it as interactive as possible. I think it's something that we've highlighted this a couple of times. If you're doing a PowerPoint, minimum once per slide. The end of every slide, when you finish, you talk your little bits and pieces. Ideally, as you're going through the slide, it's maybe interactive as well, right? So at minimum, though, at the end of every slide, there should be some interaction. Yeah. No one wants to sit there and listen for 30 minutes. That's the first do. Be interactive.
So I think talk about being interactive, right? I think give yourself in your planning, really plan out where your interaction points are, and then in your head, when to stop and ask those questions. Like Bill, fantastic. End of every slide, he's got the question. He's baked in the planning for himself. And as a leader, when he sees that question on the PowerPoint, I've got to stop here and ask some questions, right? So bake it into your process, into what you're doing. It is incredibly irritating to watch people. 100%, Bill said, 20 minutes of blabbering on. You're just sitting there, and usually it's really listen. Most material that we work with is dry. You know what I mean? Yeah, correct. Corporate material is never going to be gangbuster information, right? It's rarely going to be that way. So you need to really bake in that pizzazz, that stop point, so that people can absorb that information as well. I think the other don't just go, does that make sense? You don't go through a whole bunch of information and go, does that make sense? Everyone okay with that? Those are closed questions. Those are wolves in sheep's clothing. Closed questions. They're not really that open.
A bit of a game for this if you are doing something at the end of your slide, maybe use that as your linking point to the next slide. So for example, in my presentation, we've got the first one. We ask a million questions. They don't figure out it is. So my question at the end of the first slide, the whole slide is interactive. It's been a game the whole time. But that slide finishes with the pops up on screen saying, was that effective? And I'll ask again, do you think that was effective? Okay, why do you think it was not effective? What do you think? Bang, hit next slide. What do you think effective is? Perfect little segue into the next slide.
Yeah,
and then on the next slide, okay, guys, give me some examples. What do you think effective questioning is? What does effective questioning look like? And then maybe they'll work through that. Okay, so we know what an effective question is, but is an effective question always a good question? What makes a good question? Ask them what makes a good question. That's the end of the slide. Oh, guess what the next slide is? Just so happens, what's a good question? It's a really easy way to do it if you can't think of any other way. Just try to get some kind of question that links to your next point, because then it also makes your presentation feel really smooth, even if it's a little all over the gaff.
Correct. The other thing as well is letting the point sit, I call it, which is, when you're going from one point, similar to what Bill kind of suggested there, when you're going from one point to another point or one slide to another slide, is really nailing down the importance. So we've got, we just spoke about, I don't know, open questions just now. Why do you think that's important? Get people to actually talk about it, that kind of stuff. And as Bill just said there, but that also kind of solidifies it in their head around, okay, this is really important. This is important that I listen to the next bit as well. It's keying really well. Again, don't ask. I think the example I always say about like those kind of, some of those open questions that aren't that open, it's like in Australia when people go, how's your day going, right? Like they don't actually want to know how your day's going. And most people just go good or, I'm tired, whatever. But they're not actually giving you can do anything with. If you actually want to know how a person's day is going, what did you get up to today? Is actually a better question than that.
Correct.
So, well, if you're running a session with effective questions, make sure you bloody well ask effective questions yourself, is all I'm saying.
No, you're exactly correct. No, I think you bang on. I think that's probably like the main do. I think there are a couple others as well, but I think making sure, you just really got to make sure your session is interactive. I think it's the number one point. I don't think I can stress this enough. I think that is how you're really going to make this land, and make sure that you have planned it out and that it's cohesive and it kind of flows. You don't want to be all over the shop. And I would also, I think it kind of goes without saying, just like, make sure you are prepared for any questions you may get back. I think it's a big thing. Like if, you're asking an effective question, some people may not understand, and you need to be prepared that they're going to ask things of you. Like, I think it sounds very simple, but I've seen a lot of leaders get unstuck because they're too stuck to the plan and there's no flexibility there. Wouldn't you agree, Jules?
Yeah. While you were saying that, what came into my mind actually, and if you have the time, if you've got a naysayer, those are amazing people when you're running a huddle, because if you can convert that person on the spot, you got the confidence to do that. Do it. Because I love them. When I used to be a facilitator and I'll run halfway through a session and somebody's like, I don't think that's going to work. I love those people, because then in front of everyone, I'll break it down. Not to kind of make them feel bad or anything. I'll just go, okay, let's talk through the breakdance again.
Break it down, dog.
Correct. Yeah, just break it down. But what I'll do is I'll be like, okay, talk me through that. Well, why do you think it's not going to work? Like it becomes a kind of one-on-one coaching session in the midst of your training or facilitation session. It's fantastic, because if they're thinking it, there's probably some other people at the back of their mind even thinking, oh, geez, this is a load of nonsense. Why am I here? But if you can change the biggest naysayer, then you'll change hearts across the room. And I think use as Bill said, don't just stick to the script all the time. I think if there's moments you think it's more powerful to step away, given it's time though. Like if this happens in the last 2 minutes of your session and you need to get everyone back online.
You know what I'd say? Here's a do. If that happens at the end of your session, guess what? Our next session is going to be about. You know what? Great point. Actually, it's a great point that you feel that way. Obviously, I do think this is going to work. However, what we'll do next time, we'll get a full session around that. What I'd love for you to do is send me why you don't think it's going to work, and then we'll hustle on that. And then next session in front of the group, bang, you want to pick that. Encourage
people to send you examples of like why they think it doesn't work, that kind of stuff. So you can use that in your next session as well, which is great.
Yeah, correct. I think exactly. One thing that, and this is into my do's as well, and I do this in group sessions, just remind the gang that there is no failure, especially if you're in like a contact center environment. I was in a team meeting the other day, actually. It was really, really good. One of the leaders asked people to share examples of how they do a thing, and there was a couple really good consultants in the team, and they were sharing their ideas. And then some of the consultants that have been struggling a lot, I really like that. I might try this. I might try that. I might try this. And I finished off the session and asked me if I had anything I wanted to add with, you can't fail. You cannot fail. This is a group session. Like, this is you're in a call center. It's a numbers game. right? You're going to get 40 calls today. You're going to get 40 calls tomorrow. You're going to get 40 calls the day after that. That is incredible because it just means that you can try something for a whole day, just hammer the same thing all day. And then you have empirical data to whether it works or not.
Yeah, correct.
You know what I mean? Like we said, at the end of the day, everything's an average, right? Like if by over 40 calls, it'll all come out in the wash. You'll get good ones, bad ones, complaints, happy customers. You'll get a real smorgasbord. And so you have empirical data. I did this, it didn't work. If it didn't work, that's not a problem. It's not a failure because what it does mean is you now know something that doesn't work. So tomorrow you can try an amended version of that, or you can try something different and just hammer it all day until it works. And you have unlimited chances to figure out the right thing. There is no failure. And I think if you can encourage your team to think that way, and if you back your team on that as well, like, and this is one thing I really like about my new boss, actually. He said to me that he doesn't care if he's listening to a bunch of a consultant's calls and then not getting the results, but he can listen and you can see that they're trying things and they're genuinely putting the effort in. He's happy with that. He's like, as long as they're genuinely doing the right behaviors, because eventually they'll get there. That's all that matters. And I think if you can really encourage your team to do that, they're probably not going to fail anyway, to be honest. If they're putting the effort in, if they're genuinely openly trying and giving it a red hot crack, sooner or later something's going to stick. But I think it's a real powerful tool to let your team know that and let them know that they've got that safety net and let them know that they can't go wrong. Worst case, they learn what doesn't work. I guarantee if you do that, you'll have a stack of success with your team because they'll just feel that support and encouragement. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if you ask people to try things, don't be surprised when they do. Live with those consequences when they do as well.
Yeah,
and I think take the accountability as a leader that this is something that you've asked them to do, and so it's going to take some time to you got to take accountability there. As much as you're asking your people to take accountability, there's some accountability.
Well, I would say it is an us thing anyway, though, right? Like this is my view on this. Like it's not the consultant's not alone in this. It's not tennis. It's not a solo sport. It is a team sport. What we're doing is a team thing. We work on as a team. If they try something and it doesn't work, that's for me and them as their leader to sit down and be like, all right, why didn't this work? Let's figure this out. Let's try the next thing. And something, to be honest, it's kind of like if you approach it that way, it's exciting and it's interesting. Because when you have that breakthrough off the back of 2 or 3 days of trying a few different things and it works, you've made a consultant that's going to do that thing for life. Like they're going to be locked in. You know what I mean? Like they've had that success. They've created their own success and results. And if you're doing that on a team scale, you've got the whole team trying things. And it's a really powerful tool to get them to share successes and losses. You know, like if we're talking on effective questions and I do this, I'm skipping ahead actually a little bit to commitments potentially, but you know, you get the team to share. One of my follow-up activities actually is around, I want you to share examples, good or bad. If you try a good question and you think it absolutely bangs and it works, pop it in the chat and let everyone know what you asked and what the result was. If you tried something and it really didn't work, pop it in the chat, and then as a group we'll look at it and be like, oh, maybe you should have asked this instead, or maybe you could have tried this. And it gets everyone to like, it becomes the team's baby. The team are trying to work on their effective questioning and grow together. And that like collaboration creates a bit of excitement around it. Because when we have the success and we have the breakthrough and our numbers start to go up, it's not my success, it was their success. And that is going to be more powerful for the next thing that I try to achieve with the team.
No, I think, I mean, we definitely have, segue into commitments beautifully there, Bill. But yeah, I think...
#less.
Yeah, definitely. So walking into the commitments bit, I think commitments is also a part of your presentation, and it's an ongoing way to put proof into the pudding, right? So give you an example, like you're talking about effective questions here. I run a similar session on like empathy with my people. And one of the commitments we had was similar to what you said there, post examples on the team chat so that everyone else can see, how you're going, right? So not only send examples to me, but like, we created this real groundswell around empathy. So everyone else saw people use empathy, and the people who were dragging their heels and stuff like that in the session and afterwards kind of saw everyone kind of posting, and they were like, oh shit, I need to post something too. And lo and behold, even the stragglers were starting to post empathy things in there, and everyone else who was like on board was like congratulating me, oh well done, you posted empathy, correct. So create a real groundswell of empathy. Like in like 2-3 weeks we were like masters of it. Everyone was like really good on the empathy in terms of the chats and stuff like that. It was great. But one of the other things that I chose to do in terms around commitments is I chose a champion for that. So I chose probably one of the, some of the people who maybe show some leadership capability in the team, and I chose them and said, hey, do you want to be the champion? So whenever someone posts something, you collate all these great empathy statements, whatever, and pop it on the team canvas and whatever, and call out people, all that kind of stuff. And if you see one that you think is fantastic, just shoot it to me. Commitments is key to clinching this whole thing, tying it up in a nice neat bow.
Yeah. And I think just that, like, I'm a big fan of trying to publicly share things in the chat. I think. I think some. It's always interesting to me. Any leader that pushes back to this, it's always, but some people don't like to share what they're doing in the chat. The only people that don't like to share what they're doing are the people that are not doing a good job. I'm going to call it what it is, right? I remember people talking about this result. Oh, this one person in my team doesn't like when the team stats are shared. Good. You know what I mean? Like, they shouldn't like it. They should sit there looking at the numbers, not happy because their stats are not good. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, no one who's doing well. No one who's doing well is going to be like, no, please don't share my.
No, I don't want everyone to know that my results are comfortably the best. It makes me feel awkward that I'm so much better than everyone. Behave yourself. No one who's good wants that, right? But I think sharing success in a public forum like that really does work. And interestingly enough, right? So I haven't actually taken over my new team yet at work. Like, I'm about 2 weeks out because I'm still in training, right? But I got added to their team chat on Thursday. All day Thursday didn't say anything, but there's a couple metrics that they're focused on towards the end of the month, and they post in there when they've achieved one. And a couple people just drop a like or whatever. On Friday, I started getting around every single one that was popped into the chat. They're new leaders in the chat, they're new leaders watching it, and every single time someone posted, I've hit this, I've done the referral for this, I was like, amazing work, you're absolutely cooked here. One guy got like 2 or 3 and I was like, man, we're gonna have to start calling this guy the chef, the way that he's cooking. And it was so interesting to me that it went from like people just liking it to someone would post one, everyone else in the team started getting around it. Literally other people in the team started being like, amazing work, man, what did you do, you had that work, and stuff like that. And it was just really interesting. It probably took me like half a day of just, I responded to 5 or 6 before all of a sudden everybody was doing it. And it became one of those team things. And it does work, because if you as a leader need to take this on, I think. If someone posts in the team chat and actually does follow up an example and you get around it, other people want the same. Like if the leader's going around patting someone on the head, all people go, damn, I'm falling behind. You know what I mean? Like, I actually need to be seen as doing a good job as well. So I need to get on this. I need to be the next one. And it's a really powerful motivator, I think.
Yeah, success is infectious, right? Like and when you're around successful people, it's the old adage of like, when you're like young and you're going to school and your mum and dad are like, don't hang around the bad crowd because you'll become bad. But like, it is true in a lot of ways, right? Like, who you choose to hang around with is who you become in a lot of ways. It's the same with the team. So if that, you don't choose your team, but you can choose how you interact with them. And I think that's the key there as well as a leader, is just make sure that you celebrate successes and success becomes all right than you think it does.
No, 100%. I think the amount of times that like a random stat will be shared, like for example, all of a sudden it'd be like late, like how often someone's been late, and someone will pull the numbers for lates in this year and they post it in, and the person that's late all the time sees that they're late all the time and sees how not late everybody else is. They go, oh, I actually have a problem here. Like, I think it really does, like you it's not, you necessarily don't want to be bottom, it's just you don't want to really stand out in that sense, I think, especially when it comes to negative performance. Like, nobody wants to be known for being not good at their job, and everyone wants to be known for being good at their job, I think.
Yeah, and everyone has a little bit of self-delusion, I think, sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, we all think we're the bee's knees until, everyone thinks they're the top dog until you maybe see another top dog. You know what I mean? Like, and you're like,
the consultants that are always worse for that are those who are like the really like mouthy ones, the ones that are a bit naughty, and they always think that they don't do their job because it can't be asked, but they still think they're elite anyway. And sometimes you need to sit down and be like, how do you think you're doing at your job? Oh, I think I'm doing pretty good. Well, you're not. And here's empirical evidence as to why you're not. Bang. And it's very like, you don't probably be that brutal with it, but it's just like, well, you say you're doing a good job, but the numbers say that you suck. How do you feel knowing that you're the worst person in the team? Like, you are the lowest performing member in this team. How does that feel? And like, for someone that's like that has a bad attitude, it still sucks, dude. Like, no one wants to be told, like, you think you're better than everyone, you're actually worse than everyone.
Yeah.
What do you do about it? So I don't think I'd probably be that harsh, but
no, definitely not. Don't be like, how bad does it feel to be? To bring it back to commitments for your huddle, for your workshop, is tying it into the behaviors you discussed. We spoke about last session around how important behaviors in coaching. They're still important in huddles, in training sessions. What did you discuss is really important in that huddle, in that training session? What are the behaviors linked to those really important facts, figures? And then that shapes your commitment. So what are you actually going to be doing after the session? When are you going to be doing those? All those things you need to nail down in your session. And I would send a bit of a summary at the end of it. Go, hey guys, this is what we spoke about in the session. You can even post your slide pack, whatever you want to, but here are the important points. This is what you guys have committed to doing over the next day, over the next hour, whatever it is, right? And then that kind of brings you into your follow-up, Bill, which is all important. This is where the coaching, the training session goes from being an okay or good training session to actually doing its job, which is to change behavior. So what do you do to kind of follow up once the commitments have been set?
Yeah. So if my commitment's a specific action, right, around like, say asking good questions, we've gone for a real specific, this is what we're going to do today. The first thing I do at the end of the session is probably grab my like one or two like people that want to move up, right? The people in your team that want to be known as the best, want to be the team leaders, your two ICs if you've got one, if not, just whoever's like your guy, right? I guarantee you've got one in your team. And I go specific to them and be like, I need you to do this ASAP. Like if we've discussed sharing an example of effective questions in the chat, I'd really love for you to post within the next half an hour. Right, and just ask them to do it as a favor for you, because the one, they want to be first because it's good for them and their development to show that they're getting around you. They can put that in there when they go to an interview for a team leader role. These are the things I've done to support my current leader. It's good for them. But then two, it gets the ball rolling. Right, things in motion stay in motion. I say this all the time.
Dodgy real estate tactic from the 80s. You know what I mean? You have someone in the auction, just bidding for
have an industry client.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. If you're feeling real cheeky, you could go to the person that was the naysayer and go to them and be like, hey, look, I've got a real good opportunity for your development here. Like, it's going to make you stand out. I really want you to give this going the next. I want you to post an example. I want you to be the first. Challenge them a little bit. Dare them a little bit. You say it doesn't work. I think it does work. Prove me wrong. I want you to go and do this in the next half an hour, and I want you to post in the chat how it goes or not, whether it works or not. Call them out on their bullshit, right?
Yeah,
like you say it doesn't work. Let's find out, bro. Let's write you right now. Money where your mouth is, king. They'll do it. It'll work. Happy days. But even if it doesn't, again, as we spoke, there is no failure. So that's kind of what I do anyway. Like I'll probably go to one or two people and be like, I really want you to get on this. I want you to do it ASAP. Then I think you have to show action as well. If you've taken any commitments out for yourself, deliver on them as soon as you possibly can. If someone does post in the chat around the thing, if that's the way you've decided to follow it up, it's something obviously both Jules and I use that as our main tool, I think. I think doing it publicly is really good because I think it creates a community sense around that thing and it makes the team own that thing as a team. So I think that's why we're both very aligned on that. I think you just have to get around it. You have to be the first person to comment. You have to be the first person. You have to be over the top with it as well, I think. Like you really have to. And not just the first one. I think you have to be all day. You have to be on that.
This is where you'll spend a lot of time, I think. Especially if it's something that's really important. It's definitely worth the time. But, if you have a couple hours of just like concentrated, really dialed in. Yeah, it's fun. It's fun. Yep. You got to really... The interaction doesn't stop at your huddle, at your training session. It has to continue on with everything you do. If you spend effort into a huddle, you don't want to just waste that effort by just never mentioning that thing again. You know what I mean? Like it's just a complete waste of your time and their time. Yeah, correct. The rubber band effect.
So for those of you that don't know the rubber band effect, it's something that I believe in a lot when it comes to training, coaching, one-on-one, whatever. So if you take a rubber band and you stretch it and you let it go, it goes back to where it is. The only way to keep it stretched is to stretch it and keep stretching it. And eventually over time, the actual band itself will stay stretched. And that very much applies to your coaching. If you do the coaching session, you let go of the rubber band or go back to near where it was before. So you have to keep it stretched. You have to keep applying that pressure, that focus on the thing. And so although you might find that on the day you have to be all over the chat, like Jules said, chat will be going off. I think even after that, you need to be focusing on it because you might find the first day everybody's doing it. Say your meeting's at 11 o'clock, finishes 11:30. From then till 6 when you go home, it'll be going off, bang, bang, bang. The next day, it might be 10 o'clock and no one's posted one. And that's when you want to follow up in the chat, being like, gang, how we go on our effective questions today? Love to see some examples. Let's go. And then watch how quickly that starts rolling back in because people will forget overnight, I think. Like, I guarantee they'll come back in Monday morning, Tuesday morning, got their coffee. They're like, oh, back into default mode. And it's up to you to drag them back out of default mode. And you probably find that you have to do that for a little while, to be honest. But doing it every day, you will eventually see those results and you eventually have to stop putting that extra effort in. And then you can focus on the next thing.
And see for sure. While you were saying that, the other thing that came to my mind, and it kind of looping a little bit back to the do's and don'ts, is I think don't run a really important training session or huddle on a freaking Friday afternoon or Friday.
Oh,
I think Fridays in general.
No.
But like if you really head against the grind, that's yes, maybe Friday morning, maybe. But no. I recommend. No. Do not do it. I think any important huddle that you want to run, any sweeping change that you want to run it on as early in the week as possible, Monday preferably, but worst case on a Tuesday or Wednesday. You know what I mean? Like you definitely don't want to be doing it on Friday.
I'm actually real strict on that with anything that I think is like really important. I think there are certain, like, I don't like doing any coaching on a Friday, to be honest. Even with a one-on-one, even with my best performing consultant, it's pointless. Because anything we work on Friday, even if it's Friday morning first thing and they've had it all Friday to work on it, by Monday they'll forget. By Monday you'll forget. It's so tough. Like Friday is for embedding only. I'm not even a huge fan of Thursday for certain things. And I think it's one of those things, if it's my actual team meeting, Tuesday, Wednesday. That's it. I'm not like any later than that. I'm asking it for to be moved. And I do the same with my one-on-one coachings as well. The amount of times that you've got a consultant that is maybe the person that needs work the most, and workforce planning and putting it Thursday afternoon at 4:00 or Friday morning. No, you're moving it. And it's not negotiable either, I think, because you're correct, Jules. Like, as much as, you know, businesses like to think Friday at 3:30, everyone's locked in. They're not. Fun fact. And when it comes to learning, you're not going to remember. It's impossible, I think. I hate, oh, dude, you've tilted me. Like, it's not even a session, but you've just mentioned Friday afternoon sessions, and I'm just like angry. Like, I'm just on edge. I hate it so much. I hate being called into meetings on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, we won't get into that rabbit hole too much, I think.
Planning sessions we've decided we need to make a big change to the business, so we're getting all the leaders together to brainstorm now. Why? It's Friday at 4:00. I'll give you a million ideas, and you'll do nothing with them.
Yeah.
Oh, dude. You've riled me right up.
You can see we're passionate. We hate it. But I think, I think this, again, goes back to your planning, the do's and don'ts a little bit as well. I think be conscious about where you place your huddles. If you have the opportunity to choose early, and also it just gives more time for your consultants in bed, it gives you more time to follow up. And it's just human nature. You know what I mean? On a Friday, you're not thinking about work as much, as even if you're the best, most motivated person in the whole world, Fridays are probably not optimal.
Absolutely. Look, as always, I'd say if you've got any questions on anything from today, or if there's anything you'd like to see more from me and Jules around this topic in any sense whatsoever, drop a comment and let us know. Otherwise, we hope you found it a useful session. I know I sure had fun discussing it anyway. But yeah, if you did enjoy, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, it helps the channel out immensely. And beyond that, have a wonderful week.
Fantastic. And remember, no Friday afternoon sessions.
Knock it on the head.